What if being gifted doesn't look the way you've been told it does? It's not a kid doing algebra at 5. It's not a high achiever with 10 degrees. What if being gifted looked more like getting bored out of your mind in jobs that feel too slow? Or feeling like you can't think straight unless you're moving your body? Or caring way too much about things no one else even notices? Because a lot of the time, that's how giftedness shows up. And you might be gifted in ways you've never even thought to look for. That's why in this video, I'm going to walk you through 12 types of giftedness, some of which I bet you've never even thought of. Because once you understand your own unique gifted profile, it becomes so much easier to find work you enjoy, build better relationships, and finally feel like you're doing what you were meant to do in this world. So by the end of this video, you'll have a clearer sense of which gifts you carry, a simple way to start appreciating them, and hopefully you'll also start to see just how much we need you and your gifts to make this world better. And to help you even more, I've also created a free quiz to help you explore your strongest types. I'll tell you how to access that at the end. Let's get into it. So first, let's get one thing straight. Giftedness isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's not about grades or test scores or how successful you look on the outside. It's about how your brain and nervous system are wired. And I mean that literally. Scientists have found that gifted brains have more connections, especially in the parts that help with deep thinking, strong feelings, and spotting patterns. It's a form of neurodivergence. You make connections others don't see. Your mind, emotions, or body often are 5 steps ahead of everyone else. It can be thrilling and it can be exhausting because giftedness means more intensity, more input, more questions, and more awareness. And that's why it often hides behind things like restlessness, anxiety, burnout in jobs that feel too slow or pointless, or a constant sense that you're not living up to your potential, but you don't know why. So if you've ever felt like you were too much or not enough or just misplaced, that might not be a character flaw. It might just be that your gifts haven't had the right conditions yet. And that's what the 12 types are here to help with. Because there are so many ways to be gifted, but I've found it helps to think of them in 4 broad categories. First, the deep thinkers and knowers, which are gifts about how you think or know things. Second, the deep feelers, about how you and others feel. Third, the creative makers, who are hands-on and creative. And finally, the world shapers, which are about your connection to the wider world. These aren't the only kinds of giftedness out there, but they're the ones I've seen most often in people, and they're a great place to start. So, deep thinkers and knowers. You see more than others through ideas, meaning, or energy. There are 3 kinds of deep thinkers and knowers. People with these gifts often have busy minds, think about big ideas or the future, and sometimes feel really connected to something bigger than themselves. So number 1, intellectual giftedness. You're not just curious, you're driven to understand. You ask why long after everyone else has moved on. You follow rabbit holes most people don't even notice, and you hate doing something just because that's how it's done. You're the kind of person who can spend 3 hours researching something random just because it's interesting. And then forget that not everyone wants to hear your 5 theories about it over dinner. This is me, my husband, and my son. We pretty much rotate spewing out whatever exciting thing our brain has latched onto most recently. But this kind of giftedness shows up as a brain that's always thinking about big ideas, constant questions, and noticing how things are connected. feeling bored or annoyed when conversations feel shallow or too slow. It's not about being a genius. It's about needing depth like other people need air. Oh, I got a cup of tea. Yeah. Thank you. All right. So intellectual giftedness is often misunderstood as overthinking, being too intense, or making everything too complicated. But what the world gains is you help us see the bigger picture, spotting patterns, problems, and possibilities long before anyone else. Number 2, existential giftedness. You've been asking life's big questions since before you could spell them. Why are we here? What's the right thing to do? What makes a life worth living? You're not content with skating along the surface. You want meaning. You want truth. You want to live in a way that feels deeply aligned, even if it costs you. This kind of giftedness shows up as a strong inner compass that's hard to ignore, a deep discomfort with injustice, hypocrisy, or cruelty, and a hunger for purpose that refuses to go quiet. Often misunderstood as too serious, too idealistic for your own good. But what the world gains from your gift is direction, integrity, a voice that calls us back to what really matters. And in a world built on distraction and denial, your integrity is vital. Number 3, metaphysical giftedness. You don't just trust your intuition. You receive information in ways most people don't understand. You might hear messages, see visions, feel the presence of those who've passed, or know something before it happens. These aren't vague hunches. They're clear, specific, and often inexplicably right. This kind of giftedness shows up as psychic insight that proves true, sensitivity to energy, places, people, or spirits, a sense of being guided or connected to something larger. Often misunderstood as delusion, fantasy, or attention seeking. And that's partly because this is a gift that science struggles to measure, and because too many charlatans have given it a bad name. But real metaphysical giftedness is quiet, precise, and deeply humbling. And what the world gains is that you remind us that there's more to life than what we can see, that consciousness may not end at death, that we are part of something vast, mysterious, and intelligent. And in a world starved of awe, your gift reopens the door to wonder. So that's the first group, the deep thinkers and knowers. Whether your mind pulls you toward ideas, ethics, or unseen energy, this kind of giftedness is all about insight. Now let's talk about the feelers. You sense what's happening inside people and relationships. These types are emotionally attuned, empathetic, and often carry a quiet awareness about what others feel but don't say. So number 4 is emotional giftedness. You don't just feel things, you notice them. You can tell when someone's upset, even if they don't say anything. You often feel things deeply yourself, and sometimes that can be overwhelming. But it also helps you understand people in ways others can't. You might pick up on the mood of a person right away. Use writing, movement, or music to sort through your feelings. Feel like emotions hit you harder than other people. People sometimes think you're too sensitive, overreacting, or moody. But what you bring is emotional truth. You help others name what they feel. You can sense when something's wrong before anyone else does, and that can save friendships and even help whole groups stay connected. Number 5, social giftedness. You can walk into a room and tell what's going on without anyone saying a word. You see who's in charge, who's being left out, and what people aren't saying. You notice how people act in groups, and you often know how to make things work better. You might be great at solving problems between people, feel stressed out by group drama or unfairness. Step in to help a group get along even if no one asks you to. People sometimes think you're bossy, too intense, or trying to control things if they misunderstand. But what you bring is stronger communities. You help people get along. You notice problems early and often know how to fix them. That makes you a natural leader, someone who makes spaces feel better and safer for everyone. Number 6, humor giftedness. You don't just make people laugh, you help them see. You notice what's weird, what doesn't make sense, or what no one's saying, and you call it out in a way that makes people laugh and think. You might spot the funny side of serious things, use humor to ease tension, or challenge unfairness. Say what others are scared to say, and do it without getting in trouble. So often misunderstood as silly, not serious, or trying to get attention. But what the world gains is that humor can open people's minds when nothing else works. It helps them relax, feel safe, and think in new ways. Long ago, jesters were the only ones allowed to speak the truth to the king because they used jokes to tell it. That's what you do too. In tough times, your gift helps people see clearly and stay human. So that's the deep feelers. Whether you express it through social insight, empathy, or humor, this kind of giftedness helps you navigate the emotional world. And when it's recognized, it often becomes the glue that holds everything else together. Next up, the people who build what they can imagine. You learn by doing, and you're always building, improving, or imagining. These gifted types are hands-on, curious, and often overflowing with ideas or energy. They like to make things, and they tend to see how things could be better. So number 7, creative giftedness. You're wired to imagine what doesn't exist yet and bring it into being. You might be a writer, painter, composer, or designer, but you also might constantly generate new ideas, projects, or ways of doing things. You probably prefer inventing or improvising to following instructions. Creative giftedness can look like being an artist or a musician, but it also shows up in people who build new systems, dream up better workflows, or rearrange their kitchen 5 times just to see what works best. Often misunderstood as scattered, impractical, or always changing your mind. But what the world gains, creative people find new solutions where others get stuck. You help us reimagine what's possible, whether through art, design, business ideas, or everyday improvements. You make things more beautiful, more functional, or just more alive. Because underneath it all is the same drive, to shape something meaningful, and maybe even make the world a little better in the process. Number 8, practical giftedness. You're the person who just knows how to get things done. You can see how to build something, fix something, organize something, often before anyone else has even figured out what the actual problem is. You might pick up hands-on skills quickly. Tools, tech, systems, logistics. Be the one people turn to when they want to actually make something happen. thrive in real-world challenges that require calm, clarity, and decisive action. Often misunderstood as just practical or not creative, when actually your mind is constantly solving, tweaking, and improving. What the world gains is practical giftedness is how ideas become reality. You're the person who turns plans into projects, blueprints into buildings, chaos into order. You may not need the spotlight, but without you, nothing works. And in a world full of big visions, you're the one who quietly makes them possible. Number 9, physical giftedness. You think through your body. You might not always find the right words, but give you a task that involves movement and you're fully present. Your instincts kick in, your hands or feet seem to know what to do before your mind does. You might pick up physical skills fast, movement, coordination, tools, or touch. You might learn best by doing, not being told. You might feel out of sorts if you've been still or in your head for too long. Often misunderstood as just athletic or good with your hands, as if it's not intellectual, when actually this is a form of intelligence. What the world gains, physical giftedness, is how we stay connected to the real living world. You bring presence, action, you build, repair, and adapt. In a crisis, you're often the one who stays calm and does what needs doing. So in a culture that prizes mental speed, you remind us that knowing through doing is just as important. Number 10, play giftedness. You are an explorer, a mischief maker with a purpose. You like to figure things out by trying, not by being told. You're curious, quick, and always asking, what if we tried it this way instead? You might learn by doing, testing, or tinkering. You can use play to change tense conversations or heavy group energy. You make serious things feel lighter without making them feel less important. Often misunderstood as silly, scattered, or not taking things seriously. But what the world gains, play isn't just fun. It's how we learn, connect, and solve hard problems. People with this gift bring fresh ideas when others are stuck. You help groups feel safe enough to try something new. You create space for surprise, laughter, and creativity. If you've ever felt like the world is a bit too stiff and someone needs to poke it with a stick, that might be your gift talking. So that's the creative makers. Whether you express it through art, tools, movement, or curiosity, this kind of giftedness is about building something that didn't exist before. And the world needs that more than ever. Let's finish with the ones who feel a deep call to protect and transform the world around them. World shapers. These types carry a sense of responsibility for something larger than themselves. Society, ecosystems, futures. They don't just see what's wrong, they feel it, and they're often already imagining what could be better. So number 11, Changemaker Giftedness. You can't not see what's broken. And once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. You notice the inefficiencies, the injustices, the outdated systems that don't work, and immediately start imagining how they could be better. Not just for you, but for everyone. You might get frustrated by bureaucracy, groupthink, or needless complexity. You might see interconnected patterns across systems like education, health, or politics. You constantly find yourself asking, why do we do it this way? And what if we didn't? Often misunderstood as rebellious, idealistic, or too intense. Again, what the world gains: visionary ideas that challenge the status quo, large-scale improvements that serve the greater good, new ways of thinking that move society forward. Changemaker giftedness can feel lonely, especially when others are still comfortable with the way things are. But this is the kind of mind that shifts culture, that builds new blueprints for our world. You're not just here to fix things, you're here to evolve them. Finally, number 12, nature giftedness. You don't just love nature, you feel part of it, alive in it, in relationship with it. You might feel emotionally or spiritually connected to animals, trees, or wild places. Notice small shifts in weather, season, or mood in the land around you. Feel out of sorts when you're away from nature for too long. Often misunderstood as overly sensitive, impractical, or just a nature lover. What the world gains: a reminder that we all belong to nature, not just the wealthy or lucky, but everyone. It's a way of seeing the earth as something to care for, not something to own. It's a calm, steady care for the world that helps others feel safe and connected. And it's a sense of home that comes from the land itself, not from your status or location. Nature giftedness is ancient. It lives in people who speak with animals, care for the land like kin, or feel held by forests in ways they can't explain. Many even feel the earth loves them back, and I believe them. In a world that treats nature like a resource to be used, your gift is a different way of living, a way of belonging, and a way of protecting what matters. So that's the world shapers. Whether your gifts pull you towards systems, movements, or the living world itself, this kind of giftedness often comes with a sense of responsibility, not a burden, a calling. And when you start using it with others who feel the same, that's when the world really begins to change. Before we move on, take a moment. Did any of these types feel especially familiar? Maybe one made you sit up a little straighter or think, oh, that's me. If so, I'd love to hear which ones landed. Drop a comment below. And if someone else's comment resonates with you, feel free to let them know. One of the best parts of talking about this stuff is realizing how not alone we are. Now, one of the things I see all the time is that gifted people don't think they're gifted. The problem is, your gifts often come so naturally that you assume it's normal. You think, doesn't everyone do this? No, they don't. That's why so many gifted people spend years thinking they're lazy or flaky or just kind of odd, when actually they're just wired differently and no one ever pointed it out. So if you're wondering whether you're gifted, but you've never felt particularly special, that might be why. You've been doing something remarkable all along. You just thought it was normal. So once you start recognizing your gifts, what next? That's a bigger journey, and I'll be making other videos to explore it. Because learning how to use your giftedness, how to shape your work, your relationships, your day-to-day life around it, takes time, and it's different for everyone. So for now, I want to keep it simple. Start by noticing what comes to you easily, what energizes you, what you do without even trying, but that other people find surprising or don't seem to do at all. That's often where your gifts live. Now that you've seen some of the different ways giftedness can show up, you might be curious about which ones are strongest in you. And that's why I built the 12 Gifted Types quiz. It's a free ChatGPT powered tool that asks questions to help you figure out your own pattern of giftedness and start exploring how to actually use those gifts in your life. You'll find the link in the description below. And if this video helped you feel more seen or curious or relieved, I hope you'll subscribe, because there are more of us out there. And when we start recognizing our gifts and each other's, that's when things really start to change. See you soon.